And so one of the focuses in Kaupapa Māori psychology and research is reclaiming the status as movement. And Helen Moiwaka Barnes has written an excellent paper on this called Kaupapa Māori, Reclaiming the Movement.
Well, we're nearing the end of our time. Is there any kind of, anybody who is keen to have their 2 cents without, that haven't had a chance to say anything so far?
I think I'm with Lauren a bit. After talking about it today, I want to go back and run. So.
Yeah, but that's all right. I mean, in some ways, I kind of like to have the first session be a bit going whichever way you're going, in the blind, without knowing what to expect. Because you get a mulligan anyway, I don't think there's a huge cost to it.
Your mulligan.
But I guess the key in some ways is this, is that this is kind of an illustration of the type of approach that we'll be taking. It's trying to get you to be thoughtful, to be able to express them, and the questions that we're asking will frequently be of the level of difficulty that there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's just being able to articulate the logic of why you think it is the way it is. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. Or sometimes we'll set ones that are kind of more reflexive. You know, more reflexive ones in setting questions and trying to get you to consider yourself. How would you do these kind of things? So the second one was a little bit like that. It's like, how would you take it? And some people can take it in very different ways. I remember like some Pākehā New Zealanders would get quite emotional around things and take a lot of things on board. And that's all right as well. As long as you really kind of articulated that and developed the thinking along the lines that you can. That's what we're looking to try to foster with you, is this ability to kind of think in new directions. So I guess, and also we in terms of the readings, we said very little about the Montero reading today. So we covered the Allwood and Berry really is this issue of harmony, indigenous psychology. So on this question 1, and then I think a lot of you reacted to the special issue, and a fair number of you, some of you at least, talked about the young kind of idea of ultimately, creating these indigenous psychologies, dealing with indigenous compatibility, and then integrating. But the Montero one we didn't do a lot with, and so I want to just kind of highlight a few things for you there. The liberation psychology comes out of Catholic tradition in South America. So Catholic tradition is a very interesting tradition because it comes out of the roots of Christianity. This is very Christian, even though she doesn't say it so much. It comes out of these Catholic, these very enlightened, liberal Catholic priests. The Vatican is always looking to smash down a little bit. The Vatican is never entirely happy with these people. And it's interesting in that the liberation psychology ends up having a lot in common with the Maori indigenous psychology because it's very much oriented towards this liberation. And what they share is colonization. So you see, what South Americans and Maori share is this experience of colonization, this experience of being subordinate or envious of the gringo. Whenever you go to South America, this discourse around the gringo is so interesting because it's kind of a love-hate relationship. They really kind of acknowledge that, well, the gringos have done really well, and they've done better than us, and all this, but at the same time, there's something wrong with those guys too, and so this liberation psychology, you can see that each of these psychologies comes out of the social and the political conditions that gave it birth. If you're a liberal Catholic priest in South America, how can you accept the status quo? You know, how can you simply say that what we should be doing is simply replicating American social cognition and neuroscience when there's so much suffering and so much inequality and so much injustice all around? And so that liberation psychology kind of came out of that. And so that's why, I wanted to kind of just let you see, I don't know if you guys noticed or not, that liberation psychology has a lot in common with Maori psychology and not much in common with indigenous psychology the way Professor Young talks about it. So Professor Young is coming from a society that has thrived and prospered in the last 30 or 40 years. So Taiwan went from having the GDP of Jamaica when I was born to having a GDP that's still lower than New Zealand's, but it's fairly comparable. You know, it's in the same ballpark. And so you can see that his focus is all intellectual. It's much more of a developed world psychology. So there's another way that you can slice it up, that the liberation, decolonization stuff comes out of conditions of disadvantage and deprivation where you need to get by them, whereas this kind of more of a focus on the intellectual, the pure knowledge production. When you look at Young's work, it's all pure knowledge production. There's very little of this kind of the helping orientation, the social responsiveness that you see in the Maori special issue or in Montero's paper. And so you can see that each of these, Montero's, it's not called indigenous psychology. And that's what, this is another issue about the name. It's called liberation psychology. Again, they don't call it indigenous because liberation psychology, again, it has the stream from Catholicism. So the idea is that this liberation should be spreading all around Latin America and all around the world as opposed to producing individual divisions within each other. So that choice of word and terms is very calculated. It's chosen for a reason. They don't want to call it an indigenous psychology because they're talking about conditions that span a whole range of societies where liberation should be at the forefront of the effort to create a local psychology.
Now that might be an interesting subject for someone to do the literature review on. And that's the interrelationship between Catholicism or the impacts of Christianity on indigenous populations.
Yeah. In fact, Jenna, I think, proposed that she wanted to look at the impact of Catholicism. So maybe we should suggest that. That might actually be a very good topic. Yeah, Filipinos are very Catholic, very, very Catholic. And they don't have a liberation psychology, but an indigenous psychology. So,
and what we saw in the States was, the impact of Mormonism on the indigenous culture there and how many Maori people grab onto Mormonism because Mormonism promotes not only families, but it also promotes genealogical descent lines. And so that fits right in with the Māori worldview of whakapapa or kinship, which is foundational to our identity as Māori. Yeah. Nobody's done that before.
All right. So we'll leave it there. And I hope you all have a taste of what is kind of expected. And I won't be here next week.
What I'm planning to do next week is to do the first half of the session in a presentation format with PowerPoints and props, and then to facilitate a discussion about your response.